Okay, well, and welcome to the second luncheon with Andre. And the
Yes.
first one seems to have gone very well, so we might as well do it again.
Sounds good.
And there's a lot to talk about, but I wanted to show you something before we go any further, assuming I'll be able to find it on my, yeah. So I have the microscope, the Wally scope.
Uh-huh.
I took this image yesterday. So that's the Audio-Technica 2022. I think it's the MC 2022, which is a solid cantilever stylus assembly.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So they put the bend in there?
So it's a lab grown diamond.
Uh-huh.
And they put the stylus, it's carved out of the same piece of diamond. So the stylus and the cantilever are one.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's nice.
It is nice. I can't talk about it because the review is, it's funny because I have to review this on my website. It's a $9,000 cartridge, and I wish I could give it to the Absolute Sound, but the timing is not going to work because I want to get this up soon. So that's okay. I'll give them they can run the review too, because we share everything. It's a really good situation.
Okay.
So I also want to talk about cavitation at one point, even though we're supposed to be discussing equalization curves. Such an exciting
was it EQ curves? Or we were going to talk about some tracking issues, I think it was we were talking about.
That record. Yes. Do you have that record there?
Yes.
Good.
I picked it up a week ago.
Okay. Can you hold it up, or should I get my copy?
Unfortunately, it is not. Wait a minute. No, it is not within arm's reach.
Okay. Well, why don't you hold on 1 second, and I'm going to stand up and get my copy.
Okay.
Which I found. People don't believe I can actually find things in my room because it's so crazy here, but I found it. So this is the record that created so much controversy. And you can see my light that I use. I don't have a halo around my head. I'm not that kind of person. So this is a mono record, picture of Heath, and a Tone Poet record.
Yes.
They put everything that was on the tape on this mono record, and it started skipping on the track Time in Time. Some people had a problem with it, and it was skipping.
Yes.
And they said, why don't you make the record so that my turntable plays it? And Joe Harley said, we made this record so that everything on the tape is on the record and it played on our turntables.
Right.
So that's the issue. So a lot of people don't have a turntable that's set up correctly, because you played it on how many turntables?
I played it on 3 different turntables, 3 different tone arms, 3 cartridges. Every one of them tracked it beautifully, no problems, no microphone overload from the trumpet, no mistracking, no skipping, no nothing. It's a gorgeous sounding LP, mono, beautifully recorded, and it plays back wonderfully in 3 different setups.
Yeah, I mean, people might say, well, you have 3 expensive setups. I played it on a Technics SL100C, a $999 turntable, and no problems. I would never have known there was a problem. So what does that tell you? It tells you a lot of people don't have their turntables properly set up, and not that their turntables aren't good enough, or their arms aren't good enough. Wouldn't you say?
Right. Well, yes, I would agree with that. There's also the issue with, some cartridges, because of their compliance and their tone arm combination with cartridges, tend to show up issues with records that are a little more, I won't say difficult to track, but a little more dynamically enhanced, so to speak. And so that's where we get into the differences of what some of these cartridges we talk about, we review. Some of their performance characteristics and their performance envelope comes into play. If you have a setup issue, that's one thing, but then there's also a limitation to what the cartridge is capable of doing. And all cartridges combined with tone arms aren't all going to track the same. and then we run into issues with that. But if we just talk about the setup issue to start with, there are some general parameters that you want to make sure are proper and set up. And yeah, I know it's really easy to just put the cartridge on, balance the tone arm, and then dial in whatever the tone arm says the tracking force should be, and you can call it a day. That's at its basic level. There are several steps between that basic setup and a serious, more detailed and enhanced setup, which could take several of our lunch meetings together to talk about. But there's a large level of difference between those two setups and what you can get out of a cartridge in terms of performance and the quality of sound that you get out of it. But if you've got it generally set up, then you get into the issues of what the cartridge is capable of doing and how well it's able to track. That could be based on the compliance of the cartridge, could be based on the stylus profile. It could also be based on the resonance frequency. In the case of the mono records, the horizontal resonance frequency of the cartridge and the tone arm. And that's in two spots. There's the lower frequency resonance, which gets you down in the 7 or 8 to 12 hertz range. And then there's also the tone arm resonance itself, because the tone arm has a resonance frequency, and typically that's in the audio band somewhere. And depending on how the cartridge interacts with the tone arm, if they just happen to hit the right spot where a trumpet blat is going, then you're going to have some resonance to show up there, and then you'll get some issues with tracking potentially in that area also.
What's interesting to me is that a lot of people, or not enough people, understand that you have to know whether your arm's center of gravity is really in the center of the pivot point, because if it's below the center of, if the center of gravity is below the pivot point, it affects the measurement of tracking force depending upon where you measure it. The higher up you measure it, if you have one of these gauges that measures it up that high, you're going to get a reading that's higher than what it's actually going to be at the surface of the record.
Right.
And so, well, I'm tracking it 1.8. That's what it says. But if the arm doesn't have the center of gravity located in the center of the pivot point, you're going to get the wrong reading. And the opposite is true of arms like the Kuzma. As much as I love the Kuzma 4-point, the center of gravity of that arm is so high that the higher you measure it, the opposite happens. You get too heavy, you get too light a measurement. So you have to know these things. And also, if you measure it at the beginning of the record and at the end of the record, you should do it both places to see whether it's consistent across the surface of the record, because some arms behave differently in that regard.
Yes, that is 100% correct. And I've experienced that in several situations. The best way I could tell people to mitigate that issue is to get a cartridge weight, a scale that measures at the record height. And specifically, the record height, typical LPs are between 1 millimeter and about 2 millimeters in thickness. Now, there are some that go above that. I've measured some that are around 2.25, 2.5 millimeters that are very thick, which would equate to, if you're trying to make an equation between millimeter measurement and gram weight and thickness, typically 180 grams records tend to come in at about 1.8 millimeters. 200 gram records tend to come in with a thickness of about 2 millimeters. 150s, again, 1.5 millimeters. And then you'll be surprised to know that how many LPs come in at about the standard thickness is somewhere between 1 millimeter and 1.2 millimeters. And if you bring that scale on down linearly, that would say about 100 grams, 120 grams. Now, obviously, the weight doesn't always match on the lower levels, but it's a close approximation of what it is. But the weight, who cares about the weights, tell you the truth? What we really want to know is what the height of the record is, and it's pure thickness, and that'll help us to figure out what's going on. So if you get a scale and you build a little step ladder that comes on the scale, I built one, or you can just buy one that measures at the record height. You want to be in the range of around 2 millimeters above the platter, or a little bit lower if you can get it down there. I typically set the ones that I use at about 180 gram record, which is 1.8 millimeters. And there's plenty of space below that so that it doesn't, when I place the cartridge on the scale, it doesn't touch the bottom of the record or the mat or something else that's down there. So it gives me a little bit of play there. And that's always worked out really well. And once you do that, however balanced your arm is, whether it's neutral balance or any of the other two options, you're always going to have the proper tracking force at the record. And that will solve a lot of problems for a lot of people.
It's funny because I think the very people who have this problem are the ones who say to themselves, I don't care about that stuff. I just want to play records. And then they run into problems.
Well,
I'm going to find my thing that I made. Hold on one second. I'm going to find it.
Okay.
If I can find it. I found it. I'm 2 for 2.
All right.
This is the one I use.
Yes.
And of course, you can adjust the height depending upon the what you're using it on. So, and it works great. And I know when I use this that when the record is being played, the tracking force is going to be correct at that level, and that's really important.
Yes, I agree.
So I reviewed a Soundsmith cartridge that tracked the 90 groove of the Ortophon test record. It's the first one I've ever had that tracked that well, and it actually tracked the 100. A lot of moving coil cartridge. This is moving iron cartridge. A lot of moving coil cartridges just slide off the band at that point. Wow. This one did a great job. So
wonderful,
really good tracker. Yeah, that's one issue is the tracking force, and I think a lot of people getting. By the way, did you see the Luminate statistic that said that 50% of people who buy records don't play them? They don't have turntables. Did you see that?
No.
I don't believe it, but they're the company. They used to be SoundScan, Nielsen SoundScan. Now they're called Luminate.
Yeah.
So they announced that the week of December the week before Christmas, was the largest sale of vinyl records since 1991. That's how big sales were.
Wow.
Then they said at the end of the year, they said record sales in 2022 were only up 4.6% for the year, which is slower. It's slowing down compared to previous years. Previous years, it was going like a rocket ship. So now it's just going like this. And that brought out the vinyl haters saying, this is the end of vinyl is happening now. Not only is this the end of vinyl, but Illuminate proved that most people who buy records, half the people who buy records never play them. And I don't believe that statistic. I just don't believe it. Where would they get that from? Sales numbers. They can figure out sales numbers by going to stores and, looking up retail sales are pretty well computerized and tracked. That I can understand. And they way underestimate how many records are sold. I know that. But to say that half the people who buy them don't play them, how would they know that?
I don't know. I don't know unless they did a poll of a certain number of people and then they, similar to a political poll or Nielsen ratings or something. But yeah, I mean, I know some people buy records just to get the covers and they frame them. And they may have a turntable, but they never play the record, or whatever. But most of the folks who buy a record want to play it because there's that aspect of pulling the record out of the groove, reading the back cover, putting the record on the turntable, and actually listening to it and having fun with it. So yeah, I'm not sure where that comes from. It'll be interesting to dig that a little bit deeper into that and figure out what's going on.
That's what I do, and I have 8,000 files on a NAS drive. People think, oh, you're only into analog. No, I've got lots of digital, and I have an SACD player, and I stream Qobuz and Tidal, and MQA encoded. It sounds great. In fact, I have to say that Patricia Barber's Click album, if you like that record, it's on a Super Audio CD, and it also is MQA encoded on the CD level. So if you put it in if you play it on a CD player, you're just going to get 16-bit 44. But if you put it in your computer and put it onto, hold on, I got to decline this call. If you put it on your computer and put it in Roon, it will unfold at 382 at 24-bit 382 and MQA encoded. And I have to say that version of Click sounds, that's the master tape, quote unquote. That is the master file. So the record of that sounds good, but it doesn't sound as good as that.
Wow.
So it's really good but they don't talk about it well enough. So people don't understand that you can actually rip it to Rune and play it back at the full resolution. They don't explain it well enough. So when I was at my previous endeavor and I wrote about a CD that I was sent that was MQA encoded, and I played it at 192 24-bit, all these nasty people posted under it, Fremer, stick with records. You don't know anything about digital, and there's no way you can get 192 24 off of a CD. It's 16-bit 44K. Go away. It's like, okay. I love those people.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Tom Martin, executive publisher of The Absolute Sound and a reviewer here on the TAS YouTube channel. I'd like to make you aware of an offer to get our weekly newsletter simply by providing your email address through the link that's on screen right now, or there's a link in the show notes below. Twice a week, we will send you written audio reviews, music reviews, news of new audio gear, and our 3 times a year Editor's Choice, Product of the Year, and Golden Ear awards, so that you can find the best audio equipment that's currently on the market. It's easy to sign up, and we hope you'll join us. Now back to the show.
So EQ curves. I didn't really prepare for this.
Well, we can just talk about it in general. We don't have to get too much into the weeds, but I get emails from people saying, I understand how equalization works, how you can alter the frequency response, but what is this time constant? What does it mean, a microsecond at 500? What does that mean? Can you explain that?
Yeah, well, the time constant is basically inverse transfer of what the frequency is. So, for instance, and I've got a little cheat sheet here because I've got the EQ curves for RIAA in front of me. But for RIAA, there's a turnover that's at 3,180 hertz. I'm sorry, microseconds, 3,180 microseconds. And that's the 50.05 hertz turnover frequency for that. There's another one that is at 318 microseconds, and that is a 500 hertz turnover frequency. And then there's a cutoff, which is set at 75 microseconds, which is 2,122 hertz. And so if you know what the frequencies are, then you can basically take the frequency, and then there's a formula that's 1/2 pi, then the time constant, and that number will give you the frequency. And if you want time constant from frequency, you do a 1/2 pi, the frequency, and then that formula will equal what the time constant is and give you those numbers.
What is the relationship between the frequency of the turnover, which is where there's like a knee and it either goes up or down? What is the relationship between the frequency and time? That's the part I think people don't quite understand.
Well, it depends on how you're looking at it. If you're looking at it on a time scale, which is what an oscilloscope is, you're looking at that particular time on the time domain. But on what I, from an engineering perspective, what I consider is of the frequency spectrum, or looking at on a spectrum analyzer, everything is in the frequency domain, and you're looking at it from there. So it's just a matter of where your priorities are when you're looking at a graph of what the response is to make sure it's proper. That's really where the difference is. So the turnover frequency at 2,122 hertz for RIAA, that's basically a time in 75 microseconds. And so if you look at it on a scope, you'll see a sine wave start, rise, and then go down and then come up. And that's a full, cycle of a sine wave. And that frequency, if it's 2,122 hertz, the time from the start to the end, a complete rotation, is 75 microseconds. And so that's basically what it is. It's just a difference between frequency and time.
That is a really great explanation, and it even was so good that I understand it, which is good. I like it when I can understand something. So, what do you think about this Neumann pole, high frequency pole? I think it doesn't exist really, and whoever invented it was not. It was an invention, but it's not real.
Well, I think this is where things get sketchy for me because I didn't do a whole lot of research on this. But the pole, I mean, it's at a higher frequency. It's up pretty high, and there's a couple different ones. Some use 50 kilohertz, some people use 45 kilohertz, some people use 40 kilohertz. It's kind of all over the place, but I think it was based on the lathe, the response of the lathe itself, and someone wanting to compensate for that for some reason. That's about as much as I've gone into it to look at it. I'd have to do a little more research to be able to explain a little bit more what's going on. But it's pretty high in frequency, and I'm not sure how much of a difference it makes, but it depends on how much that response affects anything in the lower frequency bands, which would be around 20 kilohertz. So if the Neumann pole is at 40 kilohertz, so to speak, and it's set there, then how far down is 20 kilohertz going to be? And also that pole can affect phase response also around where the knee is. And so that could fold down into the 20 kilohertz range or somewhere in the audio band. And so there may be some psychoacoustic effects that we're hearing from that, but I can't go into any more detail about it because I haven't dove into it as much.
Maybe we can change the subject to cavitation machines. Do you want to do that a little bit on that?
Sure.
So I'm deep into that right now, and there's so much misinformation and so many crazy ideas and surfactants and no surfactants. And so, we both have used the Kermes machine, and he gives you this, you can put a record into his machine and just cavitate it and it'll clean it like other machines. Or you can go through the whole cycle and put his chemical on the record and go through all these cycles to get all of the stuff out of the groove. And the purpose of the chemical is not to act as a surfactant, it is to change the polarity of the record relative to water so that the cavitation can be more effective. And that's what makes the stuff come out of the groove. If you stop midway in the process and say, I'm just sick of this, I've done it 4 times and it's still this white goo is coming out of there, I'm just not going to do it anymore. Then what you end up with is instability in the groove with all the stuff that's partly out and not out. And then the stylus will start bringing it out and you end up with gunk on the stylus. And people have complained to me that they tried this method and it made a mess of their records. You have to follow through on it.
Yes.
And then, Kermes he has this cavitation meter. And when he first told me that the audio desk is not really a cavitation machine, that it's not an ultrasonic machine, I didn't believe him. But he's proven it to me. That machine, it was the first one to use any kind of cavitation. It's got a little generator in it that does get the water going, but not at an ultrasonic frequency. So it's got the rollers and it's got a detergent, and it's first time I used that machine, it was much better than any vacuum machine I've ever used. Mm-hmm. But compared to real high frequency cavitation, it's not in the same league as far as cleaning goes. I'm reviewing the KL Audio one now, and that uses no surfactants of any kind. It's just water.
Yes.
And it gets rid of pops and clicks on records that have had pops and clicks for years that I've cleaned on other machines. It gets rid of the pops and clicks. I got to get that review up. but
Okay.
that's good. But Mr. Kermis has sent me all of these tests of, it's like no other machine works except for his, which is, it gets to take no prisoner approach. So
Yeah.
I'm trying to go through all of what he's sending me and come up with something that makes sense, that's reasonable and logical. He sent me tinfoil coated discs that he says if you put into these machines and you don't get like pops in the tinfoil, it's not really cavitation. But other people are telling me, well, that may be true for cleaning material, cleaning surfaces, but on records, it's not relevant. And if it puts little pieces of aluminum into your machine, it's not a good thing either. So I don't, there's so much we don't know about this subject, and I don't like to give people bad advice on it. So I don't know, I'm still working on it.
Okay. Well, first, the Kermit's machine, I've used it, written reviews about it. It works. It's a great machine. It's very time consuming. And, Charles knows this, but it's time consuming. And when I want to clean a record using the machine, I need to set aside time to be able to do it.
Yeah.
You can use the machine in, 10, 15 minutes, on a record if you wanted to. But there's a lot of work to prep the machine, to get it ready. And, once you've used you filled it up, then you use the water. At the time I was doing the review, you needed to use it within 24 hours. And so that kind of sets you, with, okay, well, I need to prep the machine, get it ready, and then dedicate time to cleaning records over a period of time. And then when I'm done, clean the machine out, get rid of the fluid. And the next time I do it, I start over again. But the machine works, and it works great. It does what it needs to do. The one issue, and I believe Charles has changed the instructions for it, is the material that you're talking about that comes up on the stylus. There's supposed to be an extra rinse cycle. When you're done with the record, you're supposed to do one more rinse cycle to rinse the record and to make sure that all of the material, the residuals that are within the grooves, are out of there. And when you do that, you don't have any problem anymore.
Right.
But if I followed the original, this was a while ago, the original routine, because of the stylus profiles that I have on the cartridges, which are either micro ridge or line contacts, or even the Shibatas, those get fairly deep into the groove, especially depending on what the major and minor radius of the cartridges are. And you can pull up some stuff out of the groove that wouldn't be pulled up with an elliptical or a conical stylus or a larger format line contact. And so that extra wrench was very important. I did mention that in the review that I had done. And Charles acknowledged that, and he said he changed the instructions so that you could have an extra rinse cycle in there.
That's an extra rinse cycle in the machine.
Yes.
So
yes. When you're done, make sure you do.
Yeah, all that stuff is in the vat, though. All the stuff you've released is in the machine too. So how does that work?
Well, that's an issue with the machine itself. And so you typically, what I typically do is there's a certain number of records I'll clean with it, and then that'll be it. So there's no filter in there or anything like that you get with some of the other machines. So you have to kind of be careful what's going on. Now, the original Claudio machine, because it had a bath down underneath, and the area where it pulled the water in, the larger deposits would go down and basically stay in the bottom of the bath. And then the lighter deposits that wanted to float above the water were above the area where the intake was when it's circulating and cycling the water through. So you managed to get more cleaning cycles out of the original Claudio machine than you did. And now the new one actually has an external system with a filter on it, which works even better.
That's what I've got here. Yeah, it's great. It's very good. I have to put the aluminum foil disc in it. I'm not sure I want to try that, because if it works and little pieces of aluminum foil get in the system, I just don't think it's worth taking a chance. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know it works. I've seen the transducers that are in there for it.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like, there's no reason for me to do something like that personally. But yeah, I mean, you can put it in there. There's a filter in the system. And so your filter is going to have some little shards of aluminum or whatever in it when it cycles through. But
You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to clean a record on there, an older record that I've had for a long time. I'll give it the full 6-minute cycle. Then I'll put it in Charles's machine and see if I can bring up all that stuff, and we'll see.
Yeah.
We will see.
You also may want to take one that you've already cleaned with Charles's machine and treat it as though you haven't cleaned it and run it through the cycle again and see how much you pull up also.
Wait, say that again?
Take an LP that you've already cleaned with Charles's machine.
Okay.
And then put it back in Charles's machine and treat it as though you have not cleaned it at all. That's your baseline to let you know if you pull up more stuff, if that's because the LP wasn't cleaned in the other machine, or is it because that is part of the process of using Charles's machine.
Got you.
So it kind of gives you a baseline to make sure that you can say for certain that, hey, I have a record that I cleaned. I took this record, I went through the entire process again, and it didn't pull up anything. Versus I have a record that I've already cleaned, I went through the entire process, and it it showed more of that material. And if that's the case, then that's part of the cleaning process, is what you potentially could deduce from that.
Right.
So it'll be a good test to just check that and make sure.
I'll tell you.
Before just taking an LP and throwing it on and saying, yep, every time I did that with another one, it always did it. But we need to do it with one that we've already cleaned just to make sure that that process is correct.
You're making more work for me. I don't like that. I'll do it. So, the first record I cleaned with that process was my original British Beatle White album that I bought when it first came out. In fact, I drove down to the docks in New York. I worked at a record store in Ithaca, and I drove down to the docks in New York City where it got imported to. Back in those days, the docks were actually right on the water there. And I drove back up to Ithaca with 2 boxes of this record. And today, I'm sorry, I didn't just buy both boxes and put them away, but I didn't. And that record has always sounded good, but over time, it started sounding like quieter. It started losing its life. And I just assumed what was happening is it was finally wearing out after 50 years or whatever, because I played it a lot. And then I did Charles's thing with it, and it came back. I mean, it came back and got louder, and the top end was back. And that's when I realized that this actually works.
Oh, yeah. I've cleaned plenty of records with it, and it does work. It's just a matter of time.
I don't do all my records. But Charles also said to me, if you wanted to just do a 2-minute cavitation with none of my fluids, just stick it in there for 2 minutes and it'll clean it.
Yes.
The basic way.
Right.
Yeah. He's mentioned some other brands that he said are not really cavitation machines. And my only concern about all of this is, can it be that no machine is good except for his? Is that possible? That's kind of what comes out of this. He knows that I talk about this honestly I don't mess around. I talk about it honestly, and I just have trouble believing it's the only machine that works, because this Claudia machine works. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, it works. Claudia works. I still use it. Still have it.
Yeah.
I'm actually looking at it. It's sitting right next to Charles's machine. And then there's also a Clear Audio Double Matrix Professional that has an acoustic vibrator on it, or whatever you want to call it. They call it a Double Matrix Pro Sonic. But it's in the audio band, but it's basically a scrubber for the brushes is effectively what it is. And it works too. So different approaches. I use different ones for different things. If a record is dusty and it's already been ultrasonically cleaned and I just want to take the dust off of it, I'll use the Double Matrix Pro Sonic. Use that, quick clean, done. I'm back to in business playing a record.
Yeah, and people should know that records that come out of the jacket brand new are dirty, because pressing plants are dirty places. They're not clean rooms.
They're not clean rooms, that's for sure. So it's probably a good idea to clean your records. So.
and the stylus is not going to push the dirt out of the way and clean the record. I got into this. There was a video made by Mazzy. Do you know Mazzy? Mazzy's music. I made fun of him on my YouTube channel because he made fun of me in a YouTube video. He did a video parodying me, and I'm fine with it. I can take a joke. It was very funny. So I did one of him. So what he does on his Instagram feed, he wears this hat. He's very famous for wearing these hats, and he holds up the record and looks into the camera. So I did a parody of him, and I said he was my guest, and I wore a hat, and I held up records, and I said, so that's all you do? You just hold up records? You don't talk about them? You don't talk about the sound? You don't talk about the music? You just hold up records? And then I held up, dressed as him, I held up a Yes album, and it said yes. and then I said, I understand that you're friends with U2. You met the band and you became friends with them. Which person are you most friendly with? And I held up Yes's album, Close to the Edge. Close to the Edge. It was funny. And then people posted under it. So you're insulting Mazzy. That's what I expect from you. Why are you insulting Mazzy? I said, he made fun of me first. Okay.
Well,
so now listen to this. So now I got an email from a guy who said, do you know that what's in the record groove that you're pulling out is calcium carbonate? And I said, calcium carbonate? That's like seashells. What calcium carbonate's not in the vinyl formulation. So it must be you're finding stuff and that are in records because they were cleaned with hard water or something. And he said, no. He said, in fact, I saw your video when you visited Thai Plastics, and in that video, they wouldn't let me film inside the factory. It was like proprietary, but I could do audio and talk to them. He said, and you said to the guy, you have calcium carbonate here. Why do you have that? And he said, well, we use it in our process. And so therefore it's in the vinyl pellets. And, you know, people in these factories, they don't want to have anything in there they don't need to use in their process. And I said to him, yeah, they have calcium carbonate there because they also make pipes and tubing. And it's in the pipes and it's in the tubing. It's not in the vinyl pellets. And then I spoke to the engineer, the chemist who produces the Neotech vinyl, who used to be with Thai Plastics. They don't make pellets anymore. That factory that I visited closed down. And I said to him, so is there calcium carbonate in your pellets? He goes, of course not. No, that would be very bad for vinyl. We don't use that. Thank you. And I sent it to this guy, and he still doesn't believe it. He still thinks there's calcium carbonate. And then he was dividing it up by which pressing plants and which record labels had more calcium carbonate in their records over the decades.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yes.
That's all I could say.
Yeah. Well, you know, our hobby attracts a lot of wonderful people, and a lot of people who are nice people, but misguided or into conspiracy theories involving vinyl that, you know, what can you say?
It's kind of a microcosm of the world today. So
Yes.
pick your hobby, your way of life or anything, and you're always going to have much of the same, no matter what it is.
And
Even in
remember,
the workplace.
the vinyl resurgence is over. This last Luminate statistics, 4% raise, it's going to be all over now, especially because we're going to hit a recession now, you know, and people are going to stop buying vinyl. So if you collect vinyl as a investment instrument, sell it off now. Sell it off now cheap. Sell it to me. Sell it to Andre. We'll be happy to take it off your hands.
We'll happily take it.
Yeah.
That's for certain.
Well, you know, the last video we went on for a really long period of time. And the criticism that we heard was, it was great, but it was too long. And so I think we've done a half an hour already.
I believe we have. Yes.
I think it's gone really well, and I've enjoyed talking to you because you have a lot to offer that I don't know, and you are smarter than me, and I'm okay with that. And it was good.
Yeah, I wouldn't go there. I'm just an average guy, Michael.
No,
that
you're not.
loves this hobby.
You know a lot more than that, but that's okay. All right, I think this was great, and we'll have to do this again soon, and we'll come up with more topics. And the
All
next
right.
time, I expect you to be fully informed about the Neumann constant and give us a full report.
Okay.
All right, great. I'm going to go back to setting up a cartridge now. I'm setting up a DS Audio W3 with a. By the way, can you hear the dings on my? Do you hear the dings coming in on my computer?
Every now and then I've heard a ding, but it's not a big deal.
They're coming all the time. But I just if you can hear it, you know that's what my inbox is like. My inbox takes half a day just dealing with emails. It's crazy. But anyway, all right, enough about me. This was great. I probably was saying something to you that I wanted to finish the thought on, but I forgot it now. So
The DS cartridge,
yeah,
DS Audio cartridge.
I'm setting that up. I have the Wally scope here. Have you got one of these?
No, I do not.
Yeah, it's really useful. Rather than using a USB mic, you use this and you follow his. I showed you the picture of that cartridge, of that Audio-Technica cartridge. You can't really get that kind of image with the regular USB scope, but with that you can, and you can lay out all the angles on that with the software that comes with that. It's really, really good. So I'm going to set up the DS Audio with the EMM Labs equalizer.
Oh,
and
that'll be interesting.
Yeah, I'm still of a mind that the cut is done with the velocity sensitive transducer, and the playback is probably best performed that way, but I'm open to having a new experience and changing my mind. I don't know where you stand on that, but.
Well, there's a transfer function. So by default, it has to be decoding the RIAA signal that's on the record. So there is a transfer function in there that equates their equalizer with what's necessary to get the signal coming out to match what would normally be RIAA. Now, there's a little bit of a difference depending on what phono equalizer you're using, where the bass can be a little bit different.
Yes.
Some of them, they have different settings for bass level on them, and I'm not sure about the EMM Labs unit, whether it gives you that option or not.
Yeah.
But that's one area where in some circumstances, for systems that don't necessarily run full range, or the bass is a little bit limited on the stereo system, you can basically pick one of 3, sometimes up to 6 different, settings to get the bass to work well in your room.
Yeah.
Or if your room's overloading for some reason, you can pick one of the settings that has a little bit less output in the bass. So I guess there is some benefit, to it that you won't normally get with a standard phono stage, where you would have to basically change the cartridge or pick a different phono equalizer, or get a tone control of some sort.
Giving people, and I'm speaking personally, giving people these options can drive a lot of people crazy. It's like when loudspeakers come with options to adjust the bass and the mid-range and play with the crossover.
Yeah.
Most audiophiles they're never satisfied because they know they can always change it, and they're busy obsessing over making these changes. So anyway, I'm curious to hear it. I'm going to put it on the Schroeder arm, the one that looks like a crane on the OMA K3 turntable, and I'm going to enjoy that, I'm sure, one way or another, because it'll be music, and that's what we will enjoy the most. Okay, Andre, it was great spending some time with you, and I hope I get to see you in person. Are you going to be at Expona?
I believe we're going to cover Expona, and I'm probably one of the individuals that will be going. I haven't verified that with our great editor-in-chief yet, but I will eventually. And but yeah, Expona is probably the best shot at getting at one of the shows this year.
Well, if I see you there, we should have breakfast and skip the lunch. I don't eat lunch usually. That's what's so funny, but I never eat lunch. That's why having lunch with you is fine, because I don't eat lunch and we're not eating anything. So that's good.
Hey, this time I actually have some lunch.
Good.
But
Okay, next time but we're not eating while we talk. It's just.
Oh no, well, it's kind of hard to chew and eat it and talk at the same time.
Yes.
So,
Okay. It was great spending some time with you, Andre, and I look forward to doing this again soon.
okay, take care, Michael.